It's a strange feeling to hold someone's immediate future in your hands, distilled down to a few pages of sworn testimony and a signature line. It's even stranger when that person is your next-door neighbor, the self-appointed queen of the lakeside cul-de-sac, a woman who had made the last 3 months of my life a tapestry of petty torments. Most people who dream of revenge imagine something loud and dramatic, a fiery confrontation on the courthouse steps. My moment of vindication came silently, under the fluorescent hum of a courthouse office, with the simple, satisfying press of a ballpoint pen against a legal form. I never thought I'd be the one to sign the arrest warrant for the HOA Karen who called the cops on me, but when she weaponized the law, she had no idea she was handing the weapon to me. My name is Alex, and for most of my life, I've been a corporate lawyer, a job that teaches you about contracts, compliance, and the soul-crushing art of navigating bureaucracy. After 25 years of it, I was done. I took an early retirement package, bought a beautiful house on a quiet lake, and looked forward to a life of fishing, reading, and blissful silence. The property had one unique feature that sealed the deal: a small, grandfathered, boathouse, a relic from a time before the neighborhood existed, with deeded rights that were ironclad, or so I thought. As part of my semi-retirement, I'd also taken on a public service role I'd long been interested in. I was appointed as a part-time magistrate judge for the county. It wasn't a glamorous job. Mostly, it involved reviewing search warrants, setting bail in minor cases, and handling small claims, the grunt work of the judicial system, often done at odd hours. It was my way of staying mentally sharp and giving back to the community. I never imagined that this quiet, civic duty would become the ultimate tool to reclaim my peace. The problem, as is so often the case, was the Homeowners Association and its president, a woman named Carol. Carol was a titan of trivial tyranny, a woman whose entire identity seemed to be wrapped up in enforcing rules about mailbox colors and lawn height. From the moment I moved in, she viewed me with suspicion. My desire for privacy was, in her eyes, a sign of subversion. The boathouse, my private sanctuary, became her obsession. What she didn't know was that my years as a lawyer had given me an almost supernatural patience and a meticulous attention to detail. And my new role as a magistrate gave me something else entirely: a deep understanding of the machinery of justice. When she decided to escalate our little property dispute into a matter for law enforcement, she wasn't just starting a fight, she was stepping into my world, onto my home turf. She thought she was playing checkers, but I was about to introduce her to a very different game. Have you ever had someone in your life who was so drunk on a tiny sliver of power that they became completely blind to reality? This story is for anyone who has ever been pushed to the brink by someone like that, and for anyone who believes that the best revenge isn't just getting even, but strategically and legally dismantling the very source of your problem. You're going to want to hear how this ends. The first domino fell on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in early summer. The air was warm, the water was placid, and I was looking forward to taking my small fishing boat out for the first time that season. As I walked down the gentle slope of my backyard towards my boathouse, I heard laughter, not distant, neighborly laughter, but loud, boisterous splashing and shouting coming directly from my property. Standing on my dock, next to my boathouse, were 4 people I'd never seen before. 2 men were fishing off the side, casting their lines into the very spot I'd been cultivating with fish feeders. A woman was sunbathing on a towel laid right across the entrance to the boathouse, blocking it completely. Another was cannonballing into the lake off the end of my dock. Beer cans were already starting to accumulate near the cleats. For a moment, I was just confused. I checked to make sure I hadn't somehow wandered onto a community pier. No, this was my dock, attached to my land, leading to my boathouse. I approached them with what I hoped was a friendly and disarming smile. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice light. "I think there might be a misunderstanding. This is private property." The sunbather lifted her sunglasses and gave me a look of profound annoyance. "Carol said we could use it," she stated, as if that single name was a universal key that unlocked all doors. The fisherman didn't even bother to look at me. It was that simple sentence, Carol said, "We could use it," that introduced the true nature of the problem. This wasn't just a case of mistaken trespassing. This was sanctioned trespassing. I took a breath. I'm sorry, you must mean Carol from the HOA. She doesn't have the authority to grant access to my private property. I'm the owner, and I'm going to have to ask you to please pack up and leave. The man who had been swimming paddled over, resting his arms on the dock. Whoa, buddy, calm down. We're Carol's family, her guests. She's the president. She said this whole lakefront area is for the community. I tried to reason with them, explaining that while there was a community beach 2 coves over, this specific parcel, the boathouse and the dock, was part of my property deed, established decades before the HOA even existed. They looked at me with blank, uncomprehending stares. To them, the hierarchy was simple. Carol was the law, and I was just some guy ruining their fun. The conversation devolved quickly, ending with one of them telling me to take it up with Carol if I had a problem. So I did. I walked up the hill and found Carol holding court in her perfectly manicured garden, pruning roses with a theatrical flourish. I explained the situation calmly, assuming she had simply made a mistake. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She didn't apologize. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked smug. "Oh, Alex," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I know the rules can be a bit confusing for new residents. While your house is your own, the lakeside amenity structures, like your boathouse, are considered a shared resource under the community charter. It's for the enjoyment of all residents and their guests." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Carol, that's not just incorrect. It's legally impossible. My deed explicitly includes the boathouse and the surrounding land. I had a surveyor confirm the property lines before I closed. It is not, in any sense of the word, a community amenity." I even offered to show her the documents, the survey maps, the legal deed filed with the county. She waved a dismissive hand, scattering rose petals. "We don't need to get bogged down in paperwork. The spirit of the community is about sharing. We are a community, after all. My guests are not harming anything." The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. She wasn't misinformed. She was rewriting reality to suit her own sense of entitlement. My attempt at a reasonable, neighborly resolution had failed spectacularly. I walked back to my house, the laughter from my dock echoing behind me, and realized this was not going to be a simple misunderstanding to clear up. This was a declaration of war over a 20 by 30-foot wooden structure, and Carol had just fired the first shot. My failed attempt at diplomacy with Carol left a bitter taste in my mouth. For the rest of that weekend, I avoided my own backyard, seething in a way I hadn't since my days in high-stakes corporate litigation. The sounds of her guests enjoying my private property felt like a personal insult. On Monday morning, they were gone, but a small pile of beer cans and a grease stain from a bag of chips on the dock remained as a monument to their entitlement. I cleaned it up, my jaw tight with resentment. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that my direct confrontation would be the end of it. I had clearly stated my position and the legal basis for it. Surely even Carol wouldn't be brazen enough to continue this charade. I was wrong. The following week, the escalation began in earnest. It started with an official-looking letter in my mailbox, embossed with the Lakeview Estates HOA logo. It was a formal notice of violation. My transgression? Failure to maintain community amenity access and improper signage on private property. The improper signage referred to the small, polite private property sign I had screwed to the side of my boathouse after the weekend's incident. The notice included a fine of $200 payable to the HOA within 15 days. It was absurd, like getting a ticket from a kindergartner for coloring outside the lines. My first instinct was to laugh. My second, honed by years of legal practice, was to document. I scanned the letter and saved it to a newly created folder on my computer. I grimly labeled, "The Carol Problem." I typed up a formal response, not to Carol, but to the HOA board as a whole, via their official mailing address. In the letter, I was professional and clinical. I reiterated that the boathouse was my private property. I attached a copy of the relevant section of my deed and a digital copy of the land survey map, with my property lines highlighted. I stated that the HOA had no jurisdiction over my private boathouse and that any fines levied in relation to it were null and void. I concluded by stating that I considered the matter closed. This, I believed, was the proper, adult way to handle it. You present the facts to the governing body and trust in their collective reason. This assumption fatally underestimated the depth of Carol's influence and the board's spinelessness. Her response came not in a letter, but in person. 2 days later, she appeared at my door, holding my letter in her hand as if it were a piece of trash. "I received your little memo," she said, her smile so tight it looked painful. "Very legalistic. You must have been a paralegal or something in your old life." The condescension was a physical force. "I was a lawyer for 25 years, Carol," I said, my voice flat. "And I know a frivolous claim when I see one. The fine is illegitimate, and you know it." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but her arrogance was a fortress. "Well, Mr. Lawyer," she sneered, "our HOA covenants supersede whatever old, dusty deed you have. The board has already reviewed your appeal and denied it. The fine stands. And we've added another $100 fine for your continued hostile and uncooperative attitude." This was the turning point. This was no longer just about a misunderstanding or even a power trip. This was a direct, malicious attack. She was manufacturing violations and using the HOA's authority as a cudgel to punish me for defying her. It was then that she delivered the line that sealed her fate. "And I'm warning you, Alex," she said, leaning in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "If I see you trying to restrict access to that boathouse again, if you try to scare off residents or their guests, I will consider it harassment and trespassing on community property. I will have no choice but to call the sheriff and have you removed." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of threatening to have me arrested for trespassing on my own property left me speechless. She turned and walked away, victory radiating from every step. But as I closed my door, a cold, clear thought cut through my anger. It was an idea so perfectly ironic, so beautifully symmetrical, that it felt like a gift from the universe. She wanted to involve law enforcement? She wanted to talk about trespassing and harassment? Fine. We would. But we would do it according to the actual law, not the imaginary laws of the kingdom of Carol. In her foolish, arrogant threat, she had shown me the path to my victory. She had just handed me the rulebook for a game she had no idea I was qualified to referee. My investigation was about to begin. The moment Carol threatened me with arrest, something inside me shifted. The frustration and anger that had been simmering for weeks cooled into a kind of crystalline focus. The corporate lawyer I used to be, the one who lived for complex problems and strategic battles, woke from his lakeside slumber. The objective was no longer simply to get Carol to leave me alone. The objective was now to build an airtight, undeniable legal case against her that would not only end this harassment permanently, but also dismantle the petty tyranny she wielded over the entire neighborhood. My war room was no longer just my quiet study. It became a command center. The first phase of any good legal strategy is discovery, the gathering of information and evidence. My opponent had made a critical error. She assumed her authority was absolute and that her actions had no consequences beyond the fake fines she could invent. My job was to meticulously document the reality of those actions. The first and most crucial piece of equipment I purchased was a high-definition, weatherproof security camera with night vision and, most importantly, high-fidelity audio recording. I spent an afternoon installing it discreetly under the eaves of my house, positioned to give a perfect wide-angle view of my entire backyard, the path leading to the boathouse, the dock, and a clear shot of Carol's back deck, where she often held court. It was a silent, unblinking witness. Next, I organized my digital files. The Carol problem folder became a meticulously structured archive. I created subfolders: correspondence, illegal fines, photographic evidence, and legal research. I saved every email, scanned every bogus violation notice, and took time-stamped photos of the state of my property before and after any incursions by her or her guests. It was the kind of methodical, almost obsessive documentation that wins cases. Then came the most important part, the legal research. I wasn't just a lawyer, I was now a magistrate. I had access to the state's legal databases and a deep familiarity with the criminal code. I wasn't looking at civil HOA law anymore. Carol had escalated it beyond that with her threat. I was now researching criminal statutes. I pulled up the state code for criminal trespass. As I suspected, it was clearly defined. Knowingly entering or remaining on a property without the owner's effective consent, especially after receiving notice to depart. My registered letter to the HOA board and my new private property sign would easily satisfy the notice requirement. I saved the statute as a PDF. Then, I looked up harassment. The statute was broader, but a pattern of conduct intended to annoy, torment, or terrorize another person fit her behavior perfectly. The repeated baseless fines and threats could certainly form such a pattern. I saved that statute too. Finally, I came to the statute that had sparked in my mind when she made her threat. It was the legal equivalent of a hidden gem, a powerful but often overlooked tool. In my state, it was titled, Filing a False Report to a Peace Officer. I read the text carefully. It was a criminal offense to knowingly make a false statement to law enforcement with the intent to deceive them or to implicate another person in a crime. The elements were simple. A knowingly false statement of fact made to the police that results in some form of official action. Carol threatening to call the cops and claim I was trespassing was a textbook definition of what this law was designed to prevent. It wasn't about wasting police time. It was about preventing the weaponization of the police against innocent citizens. This was the key. This was the fulcrum upon which my entire strategy would turn. I couldn't just accuse her of this. I needed her to commit the act, unequivocally and on camera. My evidence collection was no longer passive. It was now about building a trap. The camera was the first part. The second was continuing to behave like a normal property owner. I had to use my boathouse. I had to go about my business. I had to give her the opportunity to make good on her threat. The final piece of the puzzle was understanding the process. As a magistrate, I knew exactly what happened when someone called the police. An officer responds. A report is written. If a party wishes to press charges, an affidavit of probable cause is filled out by the officer and submitted to a prosecutor, or, in some cases, directly to a magistrate for a warrant to be issued. That was the process. Her threat wasn't just an empty boast. It was a description of a legal process she intended to initiate. A process that would, by the beautiful irony of fate, lead directly to my desk. My investigation was complete. I had the facts, the tools, and the law on my side. All I had to do now was wait for the Queen to move her final piece into my perfectly prepared checkmate. The foundation of my strategy was laid, built upon a bedrock of legal research and irrefutable documentation. Now, it was time for the second phase, baiting the trap. A common mistake in any conflict is to act out of pure emotion. I couldn't just wait for Carol to make a move. I had to create the perfect conditions that would provoke her into making the specific, fatal error I was anticipating. My plan required her to be at the peak of her arrogance, feeling completely untouchable, so that when she acted, she would do so without caution. My primary tool of provocation would be a single, exquisitely crafted letter. It wouldn't be an angry rant or a desperate plea. It would be a calm, formal, and utterly devastating legal statement. I spent an entire evening drafting it, choosing every word with the precision of a surgeon. The letter was addressed not just to Carol, but to every single member of the HOA board by name, as well as the HOA's registered agent. This was critical. I was putting the entire leadership structure on formal legal notice, eliminating any possibility of them later claiming ignorance. The letter began by referencing all prior correspondence, including the bogus violation notices. It then methodically dismantled their position. Be advised, I wrote, that the structure commonly referred to as the Boathouse at my address is per the attached deed Exhibit A and the official county survey Exhibit B, the private exclusive property of the undersigned. The HOA's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC, rupees, have no legal authority over lands or structures not designated as common areas, and any attempt to assert such authority is ultra vires beyond the powers of the association. I used the Latin phrase deliberately. It was a small signal, a bit of legal flair designed to both intimidate and infuriate Carol. The letter continued. Furthermore, please be advised that any future unauthorized entry onto this property by any HOA member, their guests, or their agents will be treated as criminal trespass under state statute number. Clear notice has been provided both verbally and via physical signage. Then came the crucial paragraph, the bait itself. Additionally, I must address the recent threat made by HOA President Carol, last name, to summon law enforcement under the false pretense that my presence on my own property constitutes trespassing. Let this letter serve as formal notice that any such action knowingly, making a false report to a peace officer with the intent to deceive and to implicate another in a crime is a criminal offense under state statute number for false reporting. I have installed a comprehensive security system to document all activity on my property, and I will not hesitate to pursue all available legal remedies, both civil and criminal, to protect my rights and property from this pattern of harassment. I had the letter delivered via certified mail with a return receipt requested for each board member. The cost was trivial compared to the impact. The moment they signed for that letter, they could never claim they hadn't been warned. It was a declaration of war, but framed as a final, formal offer for peace on my terms. I knew Carol's ego wouldn't allow her to see it as anything other than a challenge. I imagined the scene at the next HOA board meeting. Carol, red-faced, holding up my letter, portraying me as an aggressive, litigious outsider trying to undermine their cozy community. She would use it as proof of my hostile attitude, whipping the other, more passive board members into a frenzy of indignation. This was exactly what I wanted. Her overconfidence needed to be stoked. She had to believe she was righteous, that she was the victim, and that I was the villain who needed to be put in his place. The final piece of the trap was my own behavior. I made a point of being visibly present in my backyard. I washed my boat. I repaired a loose board on the dock. I sat on the dock in the evenings, reading a book. I acted like a man completely unbothered by the HOA's empty threats, a man secure in his ownership. Each time I was out there, I could feel her eyes on me from her deck. I could almost hear the internal monologue of outrage. He's defying me. He's mocking me. He's on my community amenity structure. My calm, continued use of my own property was the slow, steady drip of water on the stone of her pride. The certified mail receipts came back one by one. They had all received it. The trap was set. The bait was in the water. Now, I just had to wait for the telltale tug on the line. The calm before the storm lasted for about a week. It was a tense, quiet period. The air itself felt charged with unspoken conflict. I continued my routine, a deliberate performance of normalcy. I'd see Carol in her yard, and she would pointedly turn her back. The usual breezy hello she offered other neighbors was replaced, for me, with a stony silence. Her hostility was a palpable thing, a shimmering field of resentment that radiated from her property. She was stewing, my certified letter no doubt burning a hole in her psyche. I knew it was only a matter of time. The moment came on a sun-drenched Saturday morning. It was the kind of perfect day that draws everyone outdoors. I had decided to finally take my boat out for that long-delayed fishing trip. I gathered my gear, loaded a small cooler, and walked down to the boathouse. My security camera was humming away silently, its little green light a comforting confirmation that my silent witness was on duty. As I was untying the mooring lines, I saw her. Carol was on her back deck, a phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't even trying to be subtle. She was standing in full view, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger directly at me. Her posture was pure melodrama, a damsel in distress, reporting a vile intruder. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. Her expression, even from 50 yards away, was a theatrical mask of indignation and alarm. I knew, with absolute certainty, what was happening. She was making the call. She was telling a 911 dispatcher that a strange man was trespassing on HOA property, probably refusing to leave, maybe even acting suspiciously. She was feeding them the false report, just as I had predicted. A wave of cold, calm satisfaction washed over me. The trap had been sprung. My heart rate didn't even quicken. I simply continued with my task, coiling the rope neatly on the dock. I had prepared for this moment for weeks. Every document was in order. My go bag of evidence, a waterproof folder containing copies of my deed, the survey, and my certified letter to the board, was sitting just inside the boathouse door. I was ready. About 15 minutes later, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel of the shared driveway. 2 sheriff's department cruisers rolled to a stop at the top of the hill. 2 deputies got out, their expressions neutral but alert. They had likely been told they were responding to a trespass call, a situation that could be anything from a simple misunderstanding to a confrontation. From her deck, Carol watched, arms crossed, a smug, triumphant look on her face. This was her moment of victory, the public humiliation of the man who dared defy her. She believed she was watching the law arrive to validate her authority. She had no idea she was watching the opening act of her own downfall. The 2 deputies walked down the grassy slope toward me. I stopped what I was doing, turned to face them, and kept my hands visible. Years of watching courtroom dramas and real-life police interactions teach you that the best way to de-escalate any encounter with law enforcement is to be calm, compliant, and respectful. They were just doing their job, responding to a call they were obligated to investigate. My fight wasn't with them. "Good morning, officers," I said, my voice even. The older of the 2 deputies nodded. "Morning, sir. We received a call about a trespasser on this property." I gave a small, understanding smile. "I imagine you did," I said. "And I imagine the call came from that lady up on that deck." I gestured with my head toward Carol. "My name is Alex Miller. I own this property." All of it. The trap was sprung, the players were on the stage, and the curtain was about to rise on the final act. I felt a surge of adrenaline, not of fear, but of pure, unadulterated anticipation. The 2 deputies exchanged a quick professional glance. They'd been on this kind of call 1,000 times before. He said, she said, dispute between neighbors. Their job was to sort through the noise and find the facts. The younger officer spoke first. "Sir, we were informed that this dock and boathouse are HOA community property. The complainant, Ms. Carol." He glanced at his notepad. "Ms. Carol Albright, the HOA president, stated you were refusing to leave. From her deck, Carol must have been vibrating with vindication." This was the script she had written in her head, and the officers were playing their parts perfectly. "I understand that's what she told you," I replied, maintaining my calm demeanor. "However, what she told you is not factually accurate. It's a false report." I used the specific legal term deliberately. I saw a flicker of interest in the older deputy's eyes. This wasn't the usual stammering denial he was used to hearing. "This property, including the dock, the land it's on, and the boathouse, is deeded to me. It's private. It has been for over 50 years, long before this HOA was ever formed." I then reached into the boathouse and retrieved my waterproof folder. I anticipated there might be some confusion, so I have all the relevant documents right here. I handed the folder to the older deputy. He opened it and I watched his eyes scan the first page, a clear, legible copy of my property deed, with the legal description explicitly including the lakefront parcel. He flipped to the next page, the surveyor's map, where the lines were drawn with unambiguous clarity. He then saw the copy of the certified letter I had sent to the entire HOA board. He read the paragraph about criminal trespass and, more importantly, the specific warning about filing a false police report. His expression tightened. He looked up from the documents, then over at Carol, who was still standing on her deck with her arms crossed, then back at me. The entire dynamic of the situation had just shifted. I was no longer just some guy on a dock. I was a prepared, organized citizen who had laid a careful legal foundation. "And for what it's worth, officers," I added, gesturing to the discreet camera under the eaves of my house, "this entire interaction, including Miss Albright making the call from her deck, is being recorded on high-definition video and audio, just for everyone's protection, of course." The younger officer's eyebrows shot up. The older one simply nodded, a slow, thoughtful gesture. He knew what this meant. They were now in the middle of a meticulously documented incident, and their complainant's claims were evaporating in the face of hard evidence. He walked a few paces away and spoke into his radio, likely running my name and confirming the property records with dispatch. While he did, the younger deputy looked at me, You seem to have your ducks in a row, Mr. Miller. I believe in being prepared, I said simply. The older deputy returned. Well, sir, the county records confirm everything you've shown us. This is your property. He then turned and looked up the hill toward Carol, his voice now carrying a distinct edge of official annoyance. Ma'am, Miss Albright, we need to speak with you. Carol practically strutted down the hill, her face a mask of triumphant expectation. She clearly thought they were coming to get her official statement before hauling me away. Yes, officers? Is he gone? She asked, not even looking at me. The older deputy's face was unreadable. Ma'am, the gentleman you reported as a trespasser is, in fact, the legal owner of this property. We have verified his deed and the county plat maps. Carol's smug expression dissolved into sputtering confusion. What? That can't be right! The HOA covenants! Ma'am? The officer cut her off, his patience clearly gone. Covenants cannot override a legally filed property deed. This is a civil matter for you to sort out with your lawyers. What this is not is a criminal matter for the sheriff's department. You've called us out here based on a claim that is, by all evidence, completely false. Her face went pale, then blotchy with rage. This is ridiculous! He is harassing me! He is a menace. The officer sighed, the sound of a man who just wanted his Saturday back. We're clearing the call. Have a good day, Mr. Miller. He gave me a nod, a clear sign of dismissal. As they turned to leave, I said one last thing, loud enough for Carol and the officers to hear clearly. Officers, thank you for your professionalism. I will be in touch with the sheriff's office and the district attorney's office on Monday to provide them with a copy of my video evidence and to formally pursue charges for the filing of a false report. The lead officer stopped, turned back, and gave me a long, appraising look. He then gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He understood exactly what I was saying. Carol stared at me, her mouth agape, the full weight of my words finally beginning to penetrate her thick skull of arrogance. She had tried to use the law as her sword, and I had just shown her that it was, in fact, a shield me shield, and that her reckless swing had left her completely defenseless. The weekend passed in a state of surreal calm. The silence from Carol's house was absolute. There were no more theatrical gardening sessions, no more smug glares from the deck. It was as if a storm cloud that had been parked over my property had finally dissipated, leaving behind a clean, quiet stillness. But I knew this was just the eye of the hurricane. The real work was yet to come. On Monday morning, I didn't go to the courthouse in my official capacity. I went as a private citizen, a victim of a crime. I had made an appointment with a detective in the investigations division, whom I knew professionally to be sharp and no nonsense. I brought my laptop and the Carol problem folder, now organized and indexed for a formal presentation. I laid it all out for him. The history of the harassment, the bogus fines, the certified letter putting her on notice, and finally, the video. We watched it together on my laptop in a small, gray interview room. The footage was damningly clear. You could see Carol on her deck, phone to her ear, pointing at me. The audio picked up snippets of her agitated voice carried on the wind. Then, the video showed the arrival of the police, our entire calm conversation, me presenting the documents, and their subsequent interaction with a hysterical Carol. The detective watched the whole thing without saying a word, his expression grim. When it was over, he leaned back in his chair. Well, he said, that's about as clear-cut as it gets. He was particularly interested in the certified letter, so you warned her. You told her in writing that reporting you would be a crime, and she did it anyway. That's correct, I replied. Her actions were not just based on a mistake of fact. They were taken in direct defiance of a clear, formal warning that her claim was baseless and that pursuing it with law enforcement would be illegal. He nodded, understanding the legal significance. This wasn't just a mistake. It was willful. It demonstrated intent. He made a copy of the video file and all my scanned documents. The responding deputy's body cam footage will corroborate all of this, the detective said, more to himself than to me. His report was very detailed. He noted your documentation and Ms. Albright's insistence, even after being shown proof. He explained the next steps. He would compile all the evidence into a case file, He would then draft a probable cause affidavit, a sworn statement outlining the evidence that a specific person committed a specific crime. That affidavit would then be submitted for a judge or magistrate to review. If the magistrate found that the evidence met the legal standard of probable cause, they would sign an arrest warrant. "It'll probably be on the docket for review in a day or two," he said as I left. And that's when the universe decided to add its own beautiful, poetic twist to the proceedings. The next afternoon, I was at the courthouse for my scheduled shift as the on-call magistrate. I was working my way through a stack of FELISA requests for a search warrant for a drug case, a review of bail conditions for a DUI, the usual assortment of judicial paperwork. My clerk brought in the next file. "This is the last one for now, Judge," she said, placing it in my inbox. "Affidavit for an arrest warrant, case number 237491. I opened the folder. The complainant was listed as the state. The defendant was listed as Albright Carol J. The charge was filing a false report to a peace officer, with the relevant statute numbers cited perfectly. My breath caught in my chest. It was here, on my desk. Due to the random assignment of the duty roster, Carol's fate had landed squarely, impossibly, in my hands. A dozen thoughts fired through my brain at once. Conflict of interest? I had to recuse myself, surely. But then another, colder, more precise legal thought took over. My role as a magistrate in this specific instance was not to be a trier of fact, like a jury, or to weigh guilt and innocence. My role was narrow and objective, to determine if the facts presented in the sworn affidavit, on their face, were sufficient to establish probable cause that a crime had been committed. The evidence was presented by a third party, the detective. My personal involvement as the victim didn't legally disqualify me from making that neutral, objective assessment of the evidence presented. In fact, one could argue I was the most informed person on the planet to make that call. Recusing myself would just pass the buck and delay the inevitable. This felt different. This felt like justice. I took a deep, steadying breath and began to read the affidavit as if I were a complete stranger to the case. I reviewed the detective's sworn statement. I analyzed the list of evidence, the deputy's report, the reference to the body cam footage, the reference to the deed, the survey map, the certified letter, and the video provided by the victim, Alex Miller. Item by item, the affidavit laid out a case so strong, so irrefutable, that any reasonable magistrate in the state would have reached the same conclusion. Probable cause was not just met, it was exceeded by a country mile. I picked up the heavy, official-looking black pen from my desk set. I uncapped it. I looked down at the warrant application. All it needed was a signature to become an active order for the arrest of Carol Albright. I thought about the months of petty harassment, the arrogance, the threat. I thought about her trying to use the power of the state to bully me, and how that power was now being turned back on her, not by my whim, but by the proper and inexorable mechanics of the law she had so foolishly invoked. I lowered the pen to the signature line. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page, my name appearing crisp and clear. It was done. I had signed my neighbor's arrest warrant, and it was the most just and satisfying official act of my entire career. Executing an arrest warrant isn't like on television. There are no immediate sirens and flashing lights. It goes into a system, prioritized among all the other tasks law enforcement has to handle. I knew it would likely be served within a day or two by the warrants division of the sheriff's office. I went home that evening with a profound sense of finality. The war was over. All that remained was the official surrender ceremony. I deliberately chose to be a spectator for the final act. The following afternoon, I was sitting on my back porch, reading a book, when a pair of standard, unmarked sheriff's department sedans pulled quietly into our shared cul-de-sac. They weren't the patrol cruisers from the weekend. These were the cars used by plainclothes deputies who serve warrants. They parked directly in front of Carol's house. Two deputies, a man and a woman, got out. They were dressed in polo shirts with the sheriff's emblem embroidered on the chest and tactical pants. They walked up Carol's pristine flagstone pathway with a calm, deliberate purpose that was far more intimidating than any hurried rush. I watched, my book resting forgotten in my lap. Other neighbors began to notice. A curtain twitched in the house across the street. The retired gentleman next door to Carol, who was meticulously weeding his flower bed, paused and stood up, watching with undisguised curiosity. The deputies knocked on Carol's front door. After a moment, the door opened. I couldn't see Carol's face, but I could see her body language as the female deputy spoke to her. There was a stiffening, a sharp, incredulous gesture with her hand. Her voice, though muffled, carried a tone of shrill disbelief. The conversation went on for a minute or two. Then, the male deputy stepped forward slightly, presenting her with the official document, the warrant. From my vantage point, I saw the exact moment reality crashed down on her. Her shoulders slumped. The fight seemed to drain out of her instantly. This wasn't a fine she could argue about. This wasn't a rule she could misinterpret. This was the real, inexorable power of the state, a power she had invoked and which had now come for her. The female deputy gently turned her around and placed her hands behind her back. The quiet click of the handcuffs was imperceptible from my porch, but I could imagine it, a sound effect marking the absolute end of her reign. As they escorted a stunned and silent Carol to one of the cars, the neighborhood's silent audience grew. More doors opened. People stepped onto their porches. The news was spreading wirelessly, through text messages and hushed phone calls. They were watching the Queen being deposed in the most public and humiliating way possible. Her downfall wasn't happening in the abstract confines of a courtroom. It was happening on her own perfectly manicured lawn, in front of the very people she had lorded her power over for years. The deputies were professional and respectful, but the act itself was a brutal stripping of her status. As the car door closed and the sedan pulled away, a strange quiet fell over the cul-de-sac. It was the quiet of a vacuum being filled. The source of all the neighborhood's low-grade anxiety and petty conflict was gone. The immediate aftermath was swift. That very evening, an emergency HOA board meeting was called. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from 3 different neighbors who called to offer their support and, more candidly, to get the juicy details. My certified letter, which Carol had likely spun as the ravings of a lunatic, was now viewed in a new light. It was seen as the prophetic warning it had always been. By the next day, the board had voted unanimously to remove Carol as president, citing a clause in the bylaws about officers not engaging in criminal conduct. They immediately sent me a formal letter rescinding all of her bogus fines and issuing a profound apology on behalf of the association. They also announced a full review of all of Carol's past actions and rulings. It turned out I wasn't her only target. I was just the first one with the specific knowledge and tools to fight back effectively. Her downfall wasn't just a personal victory for me. It was a liberation for the entire community. The fear she had cultivated was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief and, for some, a healthy dose of schadenfreude. The long-term consequences of Carol's spectacular self-destruction rippled through our community for months, bringing about changes I never could have anticipated. Legally, Carol's case was swift and anticlimactic. Faced with the mountain of incontrovertible evidence, the deputy reports, the body cam footage, my video, the certified letter, her expensive lawyer did the only thing he could. He negotiated a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to a lesser misdemeanor charge, avoiding jail time but receiving a hefty fine, a period of probation, and a court order to have no contact with me whatsoever. The charge on her permanent record ensured she could never again hold a position of trust, like an HOA presidency, and the public nature of the court records meant her humiliation was officially documented for anyone who cared to look. Her social downfall was far more brutal. The story of her arrest, embellished with every telling, became local legend. She was stripped of her power, and without it, she was just a bitter woman with a criminal record. She became a pariah in the neighborhood she once ruled. People wouldn't make eye contact with her. The social invitations dried up. The fawning deference she had demanded was replaced by a mixture of pity and contempt. Within 6 months, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. The house sold quickly, and she was gone. A ghost of a tyrant exorcised from our quiet lakeside street. Her departure led to a complete reformation of the HOA. The remaining board members, shaken and embarrassed, worked with residents to rewrite the bylaws. The new rules included strict term limits for board members, clear limitations on the board's fining authority, and a mandatory conflict resolution process that emphasized mediation over unilateral punishment. They explicitly added a clause recognizing that the HOA's authority was strictly subordinate to legally recorded deeds and county regulations. The spirit of the community was no longer a weapon for bullies. It became a genuine principle of mutual respect. My life, in turn, returned to the blissful peace I had craved from the beginning. My boathouse was once again my private sanctuary. I could fish from my dock, read on my porch, and enjoy the silence without the oppressive feeling of being watched by a hostile neighbor. But something had changed within me as well. I had bought this house seeking solitude and escape, but in defending my small piece of it, I had inadvertently become a community leader. Neighbors who had once been intimidated by Carol now stopped by to chat, to thank me, or to ask for advice on their own issues. I hadn't wanted to be a part of the community, but in fighting to protect my place in it, I had helped make it a better one. I learned a profound lesson from the whole affair. It's a lesson about the nature of power. Carol's power was illusory, built on bluff, intimidation, and the assumption that people wouldn't or couldn't fight back. It was a brittle, fragile thing. The power I used, however, was different. It wasn't my power. It was the power of the law, a system available to everyone, provided you understand how to use it. My victory wasn't born of anger or a desire for revenge, though the satisfaction was undeniable. It was born of patience, meticulous preparation, and a deep-seated belief that systems and rules should serve justice, not personal egos. The law can feel like an impersonal, grinding machine, but sometimes, if you know which levers to pull, that machine can be aimed with incredible precision to restore balance and order. My story became a quiet reminder in our neighborhood that true authority doesn't come from a title like president, but from the truth, and that the best defense against a bully who weaponizes the rules is to know the real rules better than they do. So, let me leave you with this question. What seemingly small injustice in your life have you been tempted to ignore? And what hidden skills do you possess that might be the key to resolving it? Sometimes the quietest, most strategic victories are the most profound and the most lasting. Thank you for listening.